Hello and welcome everybody to the Wednesday class that shall not be named. Just in case we're not on YouTube
Just
yet,
get me the cream.
welcome to the Wednesday class that shall not be named. I am your host, Robert Haas, here today. We have a wonderful group of people. A little smaller, there's a lot of people out of town, but we know we have a lot of people on YouTube. And for Arnold, if I am sending you the YouTube address right now because I know you like to go on YouTube, and I can't get an actual YouTube link until I start it. So that's one of the interesting things about YouTube. So I'm sending that to you right now, Arnold, and then we're going to go ahead and start the class. Now, Flossie asked a very interesting questions before we began. And that was, what about suicide? And
I'm not saying I'm contemplating it.
no. And obviously we're not talking pro here, but what's important to understand is suicide is considered abhorrent in Judaism, is illegal. And yes, you cannot be buried in a cemetery if you commit suicide. However, there is a loophole that is used quite often because, as Flossie correctly stated before we were on YouTube, mental health can be used as a loophole for suicide and is often the case. Not always, but is often used. And therefore, if you are in trouble via mental health, that would supersede the suicide issue. So that would allow you to be buried. So often that is used, I would say, and I'm guessing most of the time it's used, unless there's a real obvious reason.
So they can be buried in the main cemetery?
Yeah, they would be. In most cases, that is used. I mean, let's say you did something illegal and you're about to get caught. That may not be, they may not use it for that, but in most cases they probably would. So let's welcome everybody here. We have a small group here on Zoom today, but a larger group on YouTube. So welcome to Karen and Eva, Flossie, and of course, Ron and Arlene.
Excuse me, Rabbi, did you send an email this morning?
I did not send an email this morning. I mean,
okay,
sometimes I do, sometimes
I know. I haven't. That may be where
I should probably send one everyone. I was here early. Write that down, everybody. I was here early. I'm always here early. But I didn't do it. I had
That's where people may be. So
well, usually, I mean, I only send it out probably twice a month, and then I usually send it out.
Yeah, I just wondered.
Class, but David is out of town. Michael's unavailable. Luke couldn't make it.
Okay.
There are a couple people who said ahead of time they weren't going to be able to make it. So, so what we're going to do today is switch over. We did a lot of classes on the Bible last two times we did Ecclesiastes, which again, one of my favorites because it's basically a sarcastic guy going back and forth with pessimism and optimism and really broaching the gap between the greatest heroes of the Jewish world and the regular folk who go through these issues so obviously. What we're going to today is we're going to start a little bit on Pirkei Avot, which I'm surprised we haven't done that, but I don't think we have, considering it's one of the most popular pieces of discussion in Jewish history. And so we're going to talk about this incredible wealth of knowledge that is really for us, the lay people, the people who are not Talmudic scholars. So we have to go over a little bit, just a little basics for a basis for Pirkei Avot, often called, of course,
Teachings of the Fathers.
Teachings of the Fathers. Some would say Pirkei maybe chapters of the Fathers. We'll talk about some of the other ways, but it is a section of the Talmud, and most people don't realize it's in the Talmud. It's actually in the Mishnah, first part of the Talmud, that is unlike anything else in the Talmud. So it's in the section called Nezikim, which is damages, which deals a lot with, law, issues of law and damages in court. But for 6 chapters, we do something a little different. And it is very often the most cited pieces of Jewish history outside of the Bible. And we'll talk about why. It's also probably most famously known as Ethics of the Father. Pirkei can be translated to several things. So let's go over what is Pirkei Avot, and then we're going to actually look at the text. We'll hopefully do 2 weeks of it. So basically, there's 6 chapters of just verses of statements that are easy to read, talk about Judaism, and use maxims such as, most famously, if I'm only for myself, who am I? And it's just statements about life and pieces of wisdom. Again, they're very popular today, but of course, this set the precedent. And we'll talk a little bit about how it's organized, and a little bit, obviously, about what it means. So, in Nezikim, we see this often translated as Ethics of the Father. But Avot, Pirkei Avot, could also be categories. It could be ethics of categories, because in the Bible, the word Avot is used at times for the word category. So obviously, Ethics of the Father sounds much better, and it's very likely that what it is, but not necessarily. So it's categories of ethics. So, and unlike the rest of the Talmud, which is filled with lengthy discussions that goes on for pages and pages between 1 or 2 rabbis or multiple rabbis, and they go back and forth discussing an issue from every angle, sometimes ad nauseum, often brilliantly, sometimes a little bit mundane, but this is the opposite. These are short quotes about how do you live your life. It's unlike anything. I cannot say that enough. It is unlike anything else found in the Talmud or the Mishnah. It is just basically statements. Now, it doesn't mean there's not some sort of semblance of order. It's a little basic. But basically, there's 6 chapters. Now, why are there 6 chapters? That is a good question. One of the thoughts is that there is a tradition of reading 1 chapter on each Shabbat during the time period from Passover to Shavuos. And there's often 6 of them. And so you need at least 6. So some believe there was actually originally 5. We added another one to make sure there was enough to read during the Shabbats in between Passover and Shavuos. So the last one is maybe added later. There's no proof of that. Some say the last one is very late, like towards the very end, maybe even after the Talmud was, and the Mishnah was finished, that was added in later, hundreds of years later. Now, Pirkei Avot comes around 0, the year 0, and after 0 to 200, maybe a little before. And it's always, almost always, except for one, based upon a rabbinic personality. So it's a great way to meet the rabbis. Why is it a great way to meet the rabbis? Because most of the time, when we meet the rabbis in the Talmud or the Mishnah, they're discussing Jewish law back and forth. This gives a little bit more insight, slightly into a different, different look into their personalities and what type of person they were, which makes it fun. So it also is another way to bring out the character of these gentlemen, these great leaders, in ways we don't see in other places. Now, what's usually done is he gives the name of the rabbi, and then he says, speaking in the name of another rabbi. You always have to have that connection. Why? And we'll talk about that right now. The very first chapter is the setting for how the rest of it goes. What we learn is basically Torah comes from Mount Sinai, and Moses got the Torah, passed it to Joshua, passed it to the elders, to the prophets, to the members of the Great Assembly, yada, yada, yada. So the first chapter basically sets the essential precedent for us, and that is, so basically the Pirkei Avot could be used as the beginning of the Mishnah, even an introduction to the Talmud, the basis for the understanding of Talmud. God gave the Torah at Sinai. It's been passed down through the generations. What does that tell us? That we are directly connected to the Torah, to God. So what these scholars say, link them step by step all the way back to Moses, an unbroken chain. So what they're saying, in other words, is based on the beliefs of words of God. So it teaches us that there is an uninterrupted transmission of Torah from the very beginning of Moses to the rabbis who are writing the Mishnah. So that makes the Mishnah and later the Talmud holy in their eyes. Now, after that, I'm sorry, Karen, you had a question?
No, I'm sorry, just, no.
We're going to go over all of it afterward. We'll go over all of the. After that, you have each chapter has kind of its own personality a little bit. Especially 2 through 3 and 4. And then you have, so it's basically kind of in many ways 1, 2 through 4, 5, and 6. So 2 through 4 of all the adages they speak of. And then the 5th and 6th chapter are a little different. Chapter 5 is all statements with numerical lists. And it doesn't use rabbinic references, which is a little different. You know, these are the 10, what's an example? These are the 10 words spoken by somebody. These were the 10 generations from Adam to Noah, 10 generations from Noah to Adam, and they always use the same numbers. It's always, these are the 10, these are the 7, or these are the 4. So giving us kind of not magical, but holy numbers. And then the 6th chapter, the last one, which I think I told you may have been added very late, like hundreds of years later. A completion to this, basically saying Torah is amazing and we should come to study Torah. So it's basically teachings go all the way back to Sinai. Here are some teachings. 5th chapter, here's some numbered teachings without using rabbis. And the 6th one is, basically this kind of stuff is amazing. Any questions or thoughts, and we'll kind of dive in. Flossie.
Rabbi, when you said the numbers 10, 7, 4, I'm reading into like 10 would be a minyan, or is this we took those numbers and then applied them, or we applied them and then made them holier?
No, by this time, again, some of these numbers go way back biblically. Obviously 10 and 7, 2 of the most famous numbers use 10 commandments, 10 plagues,
Okay.
7 days of creation, 7 days of the week. So numbers like 4 will become, of course, very popular for places like the Seder, which we just had, 4 sons, 4 questions. So obviously now, where did these numbers exactly come from and why do we use them? That's a subject for debate. But we do know 10 and 7 were already very important numbers in our religion. By the time of this period, did 4 come in and become more popular? I'm not knowledgeable and know about exactly when the origin of 4 came in. We can look that up. That's a really good question. And then, of course, Pirkei Avot is so popular. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of commentaries on just Pirkei Avot throughout the ages. The most famous, of course, is by Maimonides. There's Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is a very famous one, probably the most famous one until Maimonides. So this is used as a study basis, and in many cases, essential knowledge. So what we're going to do now is look at it. And as we know, some of it is going to be very famous, and some of it is awe-inspiring. Some of it is not famous, and some of it is not awe-inspiring. You can't have 6 chapters in which every single verse is awe-inspiring. You know, the only person who can write like that is probably Karen, and she chooses to do it. But Pirkei Avot, you'll recognize a lot of it. And so I'm going to put it on. Sorry, I forgot to go to share. We're going to go to Sefaria, which is a free online website. And it gives you access to a host of Jewish manuscripts and texts. This is Pirkei Avot. This is translated by Dr. Joshua Culp. And we're going to look at it here. Can everybody see it?
Kind of small.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, right.
How do I may not be able to figure out to enlarge this yet. Sorry, guys.
You can make your own, you can make it bigger on your own.
I'm going to go do it on my own
No,
screen.
but I mean, each of us can.
Oh, you can make it. You guys can do it on your own screen.
Yeah, we can enlarge it by.
I can enlarge it too. Let me just figure how to enlarge. I can enlarge the whole thing on my tip. But if you guys need me to enlarge it, I will. Give me 1 second. Let me figure this out. I can't figure out really quickly, but I can just do it on the screen. I can enlarge the display and then just go back and forget about it and complain about how large it is on my screen forever. That should do it. All right, there we go. I will only be able to see one at a time. So let me know if this works for you guys. All right, let's try this. Tell me if this is too big. Not too big.
Not too big, right?
You know what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do it in English.
That's better, much better, I think.
There you go. Stop share. I'm gonna go right. We're gonna do it just this way. I was gonna do a little Hebrew, but we'll just do it in English so we can actually see it. Once I can figure out how to put this in just English. Text display options, translation. There we go. All right. Trying to wow everybody with my computer skills. All right.
Good.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right. We're just going to do the English. So I'm happy to read if others want to read. The very first one is the one I mentioned. In many ways, the most essential one because it really lays the groundwork for the Talmud for a lot of people. Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted to Joshua. Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the men assembly, They said three things: be patient in the administration of justice, raise many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah. So this is obviously a very important precedent being set. What are we talking here? What's so important about this precedent? One, most importantly, where does the Talmud connect to?
Moses.
Moses at Sinai. So the Torah, it may mean here the entire Talmud, depending on how you look at it. They're saying the Torah was given to Moses at Sinai. Some would say with everything else. Talmud, it has been passed down verbatim from Moses until the Talmud was written down.
Rabbi, what's the Great Assembly?
The Great Assembly is the men of the kind of the judicial system that was set in ancient Israel post destruction of the first temple and the rebuilding of the second temple. At some point in there, the men of the Great Assembly, when we were independently living under the auspices of the Persian Empire, they gave us a lot of our own anonymity. And so the men of the Great Assembly were the ones post no king anymore. We're not allowed to have a king. The ones who kind of were the judicial leaders and also the civil leaders. They'll be later mimicked by the Sanhedrin, which will eventually rise up later.
How many were in the Great Assembly?
That is a great question. I think the number is not known exactly for real, since they don't have records. I think it was, let me check that online, 70, I think.
You weren't around then?
Huh?
You weren't around then?
I was not. I know I look at it. Okay, so let's mention in Nehemiah, but where is the number? 120. Sorry, my bad, not 70. 120, I knew that. That is
Number two, isn't it?
so 120.
Isn't
That's-
that a Jewish
That's
number?
meant, yeah, that's a Jewish
Fifty
number.
to
That's mentioned in the
120.
Mishnah. You know, is that correct? It's what the Mishnah says. They were actually, definitively closer in time to it than us. Is that exactly right? No, because I'm not sure they give the exact number in the book of Nehemiah. And then we're told be patient in administering of justice, pretty obvious. Raise disciples, pretty obvious. And make a fence around the Torah. What does a fence around the Torah mean to you?
The ark, maybe.
Huh?
The ark.
The ark, but what does a fence around the Torah mean? Some would say literally put the ark around the Torah. Some would say we still are putting a fence around the Torah. That means we keep it in. We don't make changes to it. We keep outside influences from disrupting it. So now again, not just what they teach us. So I'm not going to read, if we want, we can read all of them, but we don't have to. Number 2, Simon the righteous was one of the last men of the Great Assembly. He used to say the world stands upon 3 things: Torah, temple service, practice of acts of piety. Beautifully stated. Now, of course, we know he's living before the year 70 when the temple is destroyed. And so that's something we know about whoever Shimon the righteous or Simon the Ron.
Yeah, unless I heard wrong, you said Simon the righteous. I mean,
Yeah, Shimon.
Is the H silent?
In English, Shimon, I believe, is Simon, yeah.
Okay.
Am I wrong? Wait. Yeah, I think so. Was it Shimon?
Shimon Peres.
Who is the? I think it's Simon. All right. Who wants to read number 3?
I can read it.
Thank you, Ron, because I don't want to try and pronounce the first word.
I can't today.
Torah, the temple service, and the
Oh,
practice.
sorry, one below.
Oh,
Antiochus.
Antigonus, a man of Socho, received the oral tradition from Shimon or Simon, the righteous. He used to say, "Do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving a reward, but be like servants who serve the master without the exception of receiving a reward. And let the fear of heaven be upon you."
All right. Great one. What do we learn from this? What is this Antigonus who received from Shimon the righteous? You always talk about somebody earlier than you because that connects you closer to the Torah. Obviously, he's not talking about working for our bosses. He's talking about being servants before who's the master. So don't accept the reward. Don't do what you're supposed to do for reward.
Do it because it's the right thing. Is that the
It's the
idea?
right thing because you're doing stuff because God tells you. It's like your parents. Go clean your room. What am I going to get for cleaning my room? I never hear that because my kids want to do all these things on their own.
Oh, yeah.
Then finally, let the fear of heaven be upon you. So it's kind of ironic in many ways. Do what you're supposed to do without expecting reward. The reward would be heaven. But on the other hand, make the fear of heaven be upon you, the fear of not going to heaven or the fear of repercussions. So it's almost ironic. Do a reward without the expectation of heaven, but fear not getting to heaven, or fear what heaven will do to you if you don't do it. So again, very interesting. Already you can tell this one is written at a time where we already believe in heaven. Okay, and we're going to continue the chain here. Anybody want Yossi ben Yozer, a man of Zereda, and Yossi ben Yochanan, a man of Jerusalem, received the oral tradition from Shimon the righteous and Antiochus. What does that mean? Passing it down. Yossi ben Yoser used to say, let your house be a house of meeting for the sages, and sit in the very dust of their feet and drink in their words with thirst. What does this teach us? Learn from those who are wise. Listen to those who know what they're talking about. Yossi ben Yochanan doesn't say the name of somebody else. They all do. Let your house be wide open, and let the poor be members of your household. Engage not in too much conversation with women. I said this with regard to one's own wife. How much more does the rule apply with regard to another man's wife? From here, the sages said, as long as a man engages in too much conversation with women, he causes evil to himself. He neglects the study of Torah, and in the end, he will inherit Gehenna. So some of these things, what do you think about it when you read it?
What is Gehenna?
Gehenna is basically, at this point in history, they're still developing their viewpoint of the next world. Gehenna will end up being hell for Christians.
Really?
But for us, it could be considered some sort of hell, or not a proper place in heaven, or you won't find enlightenment. Because at this time period, they're still establishing their viewpoint of heaven and the next world. Originally, Gehenna was probably everybody dies, you go underground to someplace, the river Styx in Greek mythology, I guess. And so everybody thought you die and you go somewhere in the ground and you live there. But Judaism eventually developed the idea of behavior determines where you go in the next world. They're still in that conversation. The one that's very alarming to me, of course, is engage in not too much conversation with women. Women will detract you from
Studying the Torah.
That's right.
Mhm.
Now, there's ways to construe this in a positive light. You're not supposed to talk too much to another woman who's not your wife for obvious reasons. Even today, that is kind of a standard that we set in many ways, in many households. But again, this is a world where men studied and women not in the same level. Women probably were already beginning to be literate in the Jewish world or had been, but they weren't studying Torah. There was a line, women raised children, which were essential. They worked, they did the housework, and so there was definitive lines. This can be a little alarming to us for the modern world, including me. So this one I don't usually use, but it's interesting to see that we still hadn't got to the right place as today. But we also cannot read this too anachronistically, because at this time period, we were probably far ahead of how we treated women to the rest of the world. There were already a lot of rules that relegated how we treat women to protect their rights, both physically and monetarily, spiritually and mentally. That didn't mean the world was equal, but there were rules as to what you're supposed to do to women, how you treat women. But compared to today, in our modern world, it still feels a little antiquated. But at that time period, it was actually probably way ahead of the game, and way ahead of the game. All right, anybody want to read this one?
Okay. Joshua ben Perhiah and Nettai the Arbalite received the oral tradition from them. Joshua ben Perhiah used to say, appoint for thyself a teacher, and acquire for thyself a companion, and judge all men with the scale weighed in his favor.
Isn't that beautiful? So again,
You want me to continue?
no, we're going to go step by step for this. We'll get as far as we can, if that's okay. We'll skip some eventually. This is a very essential moment in Jewish history when we talk about always having a teacher. You need to have somebody who's teaching you, or else the knowledge disappears, the wisdom disappears. So acquire a teacher, a companion, and judge all men with the scale weighted in his favor, which is amazing because in the modern world we tend to do the opposite. We assume the worst, where here it says, assume the best. And that is really a beautiful way of thinking, which again, after the last one, which doesn't work as well in the modern world, this one does, as does the next one.
Rabbi,
Yes,
is that why the word rabbi means teacher?
And yeah, absolutely. Because now remember, when we start seeing the word rabbi, that is also anachronistically probably incorrect. And I hope I use that word right. Anachronistically, I think I was pronouncing it anachronistically incorrect. I'm a little tired. They weren't called rabbis during the time period. Like they did not say Rabbi Hillel. The word rabbi comes later. So they're put back in at a later date. So to give them that weight. Do you want to read this one, Ron? Ty the Arborite used to say.
Ty the Arborite used to say, keep a distance from an evil neighbor. Do not become attached to the wicked, and do not abandon faith in retribution.
Right. So this one is difficult to understand because I use some harsh language, but really important, especially for kids, but adults as well. And this is how I use this one when I speak to them. If you are a student and you do something wrong, you may get away with it. The teacher will give you the benefit of the doubt because you hang with a nice crowd and you don't misbehave. If you do the same thing and you're hanging with the wrong crowd, you're probably going to get in trouble. And you may say, well, this person did it too, and it's not fair, but it is fair because this person has a background, a past that supports them, whereas yours does not. So choose your friends carefully and be careful in staying away from those who are misbehaving in ways you should not be behaving at. So it's really a great way of saying, pick your friends wisely. And I like using that. So this is a little bit of chapter 1. So we're going to go through to the end of chapter 1. Now we get to some other, let's go through some rabbis though. We get through, sorry, I should not have skipped. So we got Judah ben Tabai and Shuman ben Shattach. And then you go to Abtalion. And then we come to the most famous of them, Hillel and Shammai. And then we see Rabbi Gamliel, who was not rabbi, he is Rabban, which means he's the head of the Sanhedrin. And then you've got Shimon, his son. And then we have Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. What does this tell us? What did Gamliel's son become? He became the head of the Sanhedrin. So that's the conclusion of chapter 1. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel used to say, on 3 things does the world stand: on justice, on truth, on peace. As it is said, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. So this is a little synopsis of the first chapter, which tells us that it's going what? Torah and the oral Torah is what they call it. The Talmud is being passed down from generation to generation. And they're giving the names of the leaders or rabbi to make sure we know who they are. That this unbroken chain means the Torah, the Bible, the Talmud we have from the 5th century CE is the same one given to Moses at Sinai. Now, some of us may or may not believe that. Some of us believe the Bible and the oral Torah, the Talmud developed in different ways. But this is also essential for us to realize, but what did happen is the passing of mantle of leadership, the passing of the mantle of information went from one generation to the next, hopefully without any chains being broken.
Rabbi, why did we need this if we had the 10 Commandments?
Well, the 10 Commandments are essential. They're just a basic start. They're wonderful, but you can't build a society on 10 laws. It's just not enough. You have to really extrapolate and continue extrapolating to make sure we use our minds. and we develop ourselves throughout. You can't just say, here are 10 laws, that's all you have. Because it's not enough. It's not near enough. We don't know how long we stop at a traffic light. We don't have the judicial system in the Ten Commandments. We don't have ethical aphorisms. We don't have everything. I mean, we need the Ten Commandments is here's the basis, start building the rest of society. So
Rabbi, the one in this chapter that I love is the one from Hillel. I don't know if it's as famous. We have it in a
which
work
one?
of art. If I am not for myself, who will
Right.
be for if I'm
Oh,
only
we
for
skipped it.
myself.
Thank you. That's in chapter 1. You're right. I
Because
completely
you skip
skipped that
past it, and it's such a beautiful
one.
one.
It is. It's chapter 1. I forgot. My
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
So 114, and it's again. You can see Hillel and Shammai. You can say Hillel used to say. He also used to say. He also used to say.
That one. And if not now, when? I love that.
If I'm not for myself, who is for me? And if I am for myself alone, when am I? And if not now, when? Which is so a great adage. Who's going to be for me if I don't support myself? I got to stay healthy. But if I only care about myself, what kind of person am I? And if I procrastinate, who am I? Like voting in an election. I'm running in an election. I'm a super nice guy. Do I vote for my opponent because I'm such a nice guy and I want to show how nice a person I am? No, that's silly. If I vote for my opponent, why am I even running? It's acknowledgement that I think he will do or she will do a better job. So I think these are, and again, that's probably the most famous one, the one I skipped. Now, Hillel and Shammai become the most favorite because there's a period in history where we call it kind of a pairing up period where you have to have an opposing viewpoint, which really only adds to the allure of Judaism. The idea is it's hard to become a great leader and scholar unless you have somebody opposing your opinion. So the idea was very simple. You want to be a great leader, a great scholar, you pick a study partner who what? Who has generally opposing views. You don't want somebody to discuss with who has the same views. You need somebody who has opposing views, but who can also, who really believes them and who can support his ideas. That's why Hillel's so great. It's like why Ali was great. Muhammad Ali was great because he had Joe Frazier and George Foreman. The heavyweight champion after Muhammad Ali, who really was great, was a guy named Larry Holmes. Have you ever heard of Larry Holmes?
Yeah.
Maybe. Why wasn't Larry Holmes famous? Because there was nobody good during his period. During his reign, he had no enemy. There was nobody at his level. He fought everybody who was great. He may have been as great as Muhammad Ali, but he didn't have any rivals. It's not his fault. But in Judaism, it is your fault. If you don't seek a rival who has the opposite opinion, then you're doing something wrong. And this is the opposite of what society teaches us today. We only discuss things with people who have the same opinion. So Hillel and Shammai became the most famous goats of the people who had their own partners. Now, in general, what did this mean? Now, all the things you hear about Hillel and Shammai, there's a lot in here. It's not just Hillel and Shammai, it's their later schools. And they established two different schools, and they became very prominent. One was the more liberal thinking school, and one was more the traditional thinking school. So Shammai was follow all the rules exactly. And Hillel was, we got to follow the rules, but you can be, make exceptions here and there. And this became the great and essential debate because you have to have both for society to be the most successful. You have to have two different opposing views that can really support itself and allow everything in the middle. And that's what made Jewish studies so brilliant, for the idea that you had your opposing view. You wanted to debate the best on the other side. So it was really quite a wonderful time in terms of this stuff. Not so much in terms of what was happening, in the Roman Empire for us, but really in terms of knowledge. So let's go through chapter 2, which we're not anymore going through. As you look through chapter 2, you'll see we don't have this full delineation of who's saying what, and that it's the next person for every single one. You see a lot of it, but it's not like we need to say this rabbi taught this rabbi, taught this rabbi, taught this rabbi, taught this rabbi. Each one is spoken by a rabbi, but it's not the next one in the chain. Some of these are contemporary, some of these go back and forth time-wise, some are from earlier or later periods. So let's go to, whereas in the first sections I mentioned, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, right before Gamliel, who came right after Gamliel, who came right after Shammai and Hillel, who came after this guy, who came after this guy, who came after this guy. And so it's a different way. The next chapters are not linking it directly that way. All right, so we'll read some of them, but we're not going to read all of them unless we want to, but we're going to do 2 weeks of it. Let's go to Rabban Gamliel, who's a controversial figure to say the least. Plays prominently in this. So, I'm sorry, this is a different Rambam. This is a later person. Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, much later Gamliel, said, excellent. Now, who is Yehuda Hanasi? Before we continue, Yehuda Hanasi is the rabbi who wrote the Mishnah, who gathered the Mishnah together. Excellent is the study of Torah when combined with worldly occupation, for toil in them both keeps sin out of one's mind. The study of Torah, which is not combined with worldly occupation, in the end comes to be neglected and becomes the cause of sin. And all who labor with the community should labor with them for the sake of heaven, for the merit of their forefathers sustains them, the community, and their forefathers' righteousness endures forever. And as for you, God in such case says, I credit you with a rich reward, and if you yourselves had actually as if you yourselves had actually accomplished it all. So this is a really interesting text in terms of what we see happening in Israel. So what is Rabban Gamliel? This is confused. Rabbi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi saying. I may be confused. This may be an earlier. Let me double check something. See who the son of. I just want to make sure I have the right date for that. Yeah, it was the son. Okay, good. I got it right. All right, so I'm going to show them this one. So Rabban Gamliel comes up. So Rabban Gamliel, the son of Yehuda Hanasi, he's the one who put together the Mishnah. So we know the time period. This is probably somewhere around the year 230-ish, guessing. So 1800 years ago. Excellent is the study of Torah when combined with worldly occupation, for toil in them keeps both sin out of one's mind. The study of Torah, which is not combined with a worldly occupation, in the end comes to be neglected and becomes this cause of sin. What is he saying?
I think that's, we have to apply it to our lives for it to have any meaning.
That's right. Or it can be looked at also as get a job.
Get a job.
Get a job.
Yeah.
Great to be a intellect, but you got to get a job, whether you're teaching or whether you're a milkman. But you got to work because the labor is what's essential. Well, we talk about the issues they have in Israel with the Orthodox, not
Right.
just the Orthodox, not the non-Orthodox, that they do not work, serve in the military. The government provides them subsidies to live. They get a free ride for their whole lives and never have to work. So this is one of the passages that they would be ignoring or looking at it from a different perspective. Their labor would be praying as their work. But what it's telling us is, and this is also important for us to remember, to be Jewish, you're part of a community and you're expected to uphold your part. You're not expected to study all the time and live a cave and don't do your part. There may be a few people who are expected to study all the time, the greatest of the greatest, that's true. For the most part, we're supposed to participate in life as we study. The balance, of course, can be different for different people. And that is really important, that we don't want to have these intellects who go off into the desert and don't do anything with their lives. That is not what we want. We want people who are going to use the mind and study and then put it into good use. And that's what we see from all of these guys. Most of these guys were intellects, but they also had jobs. A lot of them were judges or writers, as was Hanasi. And they went around the land making judgments, kind of in many cases like in the West, the judges. What were those judges called that went from town to town? Roving judges, like that. Some of them did other things. They all had different types of jobs. So we'll finish here. It's getting kind of late. I'm going to go back to my normal scale. It's still pretty big. And that's just a little bit of the beginning. We'll do one more week of I hope that was okay. I didn't get a lot of questions, but again, it's one of the most often studied piece of Judaism. We could easily go through the whole thing step by step. That would take a lot of weeks. I don't know how people want that. But I'd highly recommend reading it because this is a part of the Talmud that we can all read and understand. Again, this is not intricate discussion. This is adages for life. And we can take some of them and really make them a part of their lives. And it's a really beautiful way of doing it. And it continues to be, I would guess, the most popular part of the Talmud to study for most people on planet Earth. Any questions or thoughts?
No, I was going to say, I mean, I've seen quotes. We have some works of art that have, quotes from Pirkei Avot. But this really put it in perspective. I really didn't know that much about it. So thank you.
Also, what you're doing is when you're looking at it, you can also go online and check out who was Rabban Gamliel.
Right.
About their history. Rabban Gamliel was very famous. He was, basically almost excommunicated at one point. His job was taken away. It was so harsh, and talked about UNSC, brought everything together. Hillel and Shammai and the alliances and some of the less prominent ones that are still prominent for the day, but is not well known today. So that's a little bit about Pirkei Avot. As we get ready, we again have a very busy couple of weeks coming up. just to give everybody a heads up, this this Sunday is Temple's Got Talent, our first talent show in decades. It should be an incredible amount of fun. 4:30. We got lots of people doing a variety of acts, singing, instruments. We even got a Borscht Belt comic comedian coming in.
Wow.
That's going to be really fun.
I bet I know who it is.
Yeah, who's it?
Who do I think it is? I think
Yeah.
it's you.
No, it's not me.
Oh,
I'm too
okay.
short, so we have an actual
It's your competitor.
I think this guy's in his 80s who did actual Borscht Belt comedy.
What's his
All
name?
right.
Larry, I think it's Larry Simon. But he's even got the
Where's he?
accent. I think he lives in your area now.
Stuart knew a lot.
We're going
Real nice guy. And so it'll
Stuart
be a
knew
lot of
this.
fun.
Yeah.
And everybody just come and have a good time, and
Oh,
our
gosh.
choir will be singing. Then we have coming up the next weekend, of course, our Women of Mikveh Israel service, which goes to be on the 10th. It's always the weekend of Mother's Day weekend. For those of you who do want to join us for the NAMI Action, that's our big event. We try and petition officials to help our community in certain ways. That'll be 7 o'clock at Agud Achim, and that'll be on the 5th. That's a good way. I think the members of the county commissioner's offices will be there to try and get them to do some more for mental health. So we join with 5 other houses of worship to do this. So we're hoping to get 750 people there, 75 people from our congregation. Then, and the hits just come on the 16th to the 18th, we have our retreat, Shabbaton. The overnight stuff has been booked already, but you can come on Friday night or anytime Saturday. And we have events all day long. And for those who came last year, it was incredibly fun and everybody had a great time. So I hope everybody's going to join us for that. Then we have later on in the months, we have 2 big programs coming up. Of course, we've got the Shavuos program. This is, you're the first to hear about it. We're going to have former ambassador Larry Silverman and a former international aid worker, Maurice Middleberg, talk about foreign aid and what has been lost in recent months and what we can do to help out. And these are 2 very well-known people who are giving up their time to teach us. So it should be incredible. That is going to be at 5 o'clock. So people don't want to stay because it's 5 o'clock. We'll have the program. 6, we have dinner. 7, service. And then 8, we'll do the late night studying. So anybody who just wants to come for the day in daylight hours and see this program or stay for dinner or go to services or just come to the program, that makes it easier.
What day is that, Rabbi?
That is June 1st. I highly recommend it. It should be very engaging. As I said, Larry Silverman is a former U.S. ambassador. Maurice Middleberg is a former international aid worker with various organizations. And so they'll be going over all of these things. One of the interesting things they mentioned, by the way, I may give it away, but in the entire state of Georgia, Georgia Tech brings in more students from out of the country than any, but what is the second? So Georgia Tech is number 1 for bringing international students to Georgia. What college is second? Anyone want to guess?
Yeah.
SCAD. SCAD. Well, SCAD is number 2
Yeah.
for bringing
Yeah, that's great.
students to Georgia. And then we have the Mikveh Israel Women of Valor event,
Yes.
which is going to be, I'm missing the date. Anybody know the dates?
28th.
The 20th, I think.
How do you know? Yeah.
I cannot remember who was getting that award. Ron, do you happen to remember who got that
Gosh.
award?
The what?
I know it wasn't me.
Oh my gosh.
Give their Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't remember what it's called.
I'll tell you, they're both from South Carolina. I know
They're both
that.
from South Carolina. So our very own Arlene will be one of the recipients and Sheila will be the other. And I'm sorry I didn't reply today. I kept looking on Sunday, but it's on a Wednesday. So that's May 28th. Is that 5 p.m.? I have it at 5 p.m. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes at 6, so 5 p.m. So those are two not be missed events. We hope you can join us for all of them. We'll be back here next week to study a little bit more Pirkei Avot. So I want to wish everyone all the best. Have a great week. And we'll see you next week on the Wednesday class that shall not be named. Have a
Thank
good
you.